The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. While Jesus was speaking, an official came forward, knelt down before him, and said, "My daughter has just died, but come, lay your hand on her, and she will live." Jesus rose and followed him, and so did his disciples. A woman suffering hemorrhages for 12 years came up behind him and touched the tassel on his cloak. She said to herself, "If only I can touch his cloak, I shall be cured." Jesus turned around and saw her and said, "Courage, daughter, your faith has saved you." From that hour, the woman was cured. When Jesus arrived at the official's house and saw the flute players and the crowd who were making a commotion, he said, "Go away, the girl is not dead, but sleeping." And they ridiculed him. When the crowd was put out, he came and took her by the hand, and the little girl arose. And news of this spread throughout all that land. The Gospel of the Lord. So we missed a couple of days of these readings from Genesis. We left off speaking about the sacrifice of Abraham and Isaac, and now today we have the appearance of Jacob and the ladder. So we kind of skipped a generation there. We didn't talk about the end of Isaac's life. That would have been the reading on Friday if we had had daily Mass. And I just wanted to point something out about that reading on Friday. So Isaac ended up marrying a woman named, anybody know? Bible trivia? Her name was Rebekah. Rebekah is one of the honored women of the Old Testament because unlike so many of the wives of the various patriarchs, Rebekah was Isaac's only wife. He never had any concubines or any other wives. And so in the history of the church, people have always seen Isaac and Rebekah as the great image of what marriage is supposed to be in the Old Testament. And I was talking with Leslie Warren yesterday, and we were talking about that reading. One of the things that stood out to me, if you go back and read it, when Rebekah met Isaac, Abraham had sent one of his servants to the land of his forefathers to go and retrieve a wife for Isaac. And Rebekah happened to be one of those people. And when Rebekah was coming to the land of Abraham and Isaac, it says that she alighted from her camel, and then she veiled herself to meet her husband. I was just kind of struck by that. It's one of those ancient traditions in the Catholic Church that has kind of fallen out of practice. Remember, we used to have many women who would wear veils in church. I was reminded of that when I was in Noblesville. There were a couple of young women who started to veil whenever they would come to Mass or when they would go to the Blessed Sacrament Chapel. And I was kind of struck by that. And the reason why women used to veil themselves, it wasn't a sign of inferiority, and it wasn't a sign of servitude, like you might see in the Middle East in the religion of Islam. Rather, the reason why women used to veil themselves when they entered into a church is because they were going to meet Christ, the bridegroom, right? We saw a foreshadowing of that in that story of Rebekah and Isaac. Now, so Isaac and Rebekah have two sons. What are the two sons' names? Jacob and Esau. All right? And Esau was the elder son, but even though he was the elder son, deserving the blessing, remember Jacob ended up tricking his father Isaac, and Jacob received the blessing instead. It's one of the reasons why in this reading today, we hear that God, during this vision of Jacob's ladder, reaffirmed the fact that even though Jacob had deceived his father, he still received the blessing. His father gave him the blessing, and therefore God would bless him. Now, the story about Jacob's ladder, part of the reason why I was late at coming to Mass today is because I was puzzled by this. I've always been puzzled by this story. What exactly is the meaning? We know that it's a foreshadowing of Christ in the New Testament, right? Just as Jacob saw the angels ascending and descending upon this ladder or this stairway, Jesus says in the New Testament that one day Nathanael would see angels ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. So just as the ladder was like a gateway between heaven and earth, so now Jesus becomes the ladder between heaven and earth. And every priest, in a mysterious way, has another Christ becomes a ladder between heaven and earth when a priest celebrates the sacraments, right? But I've always been perplexed by this place. Jacob had this vision in this place called Bethel. He called it Bethel. And Bethel has a very significant role to play in the rest of the Old Testament. It comes up over and over again. And one of the things that I'm struck by is that I think later on in the Old Testament, it was a cause of one of the greatest sins in Old Testament history. Remember, we've talked about the civil war that came later on in the Old Testament between the northern tribes and the southern tribes. And one of the first things that those northern tribes did when they broke away from Jerusalem, when they broke away from that temple and they broke away from the true priesthood, the true rituals and liturgy, one of the first things they did is they built a shrine in this same place of Bethel. I think it was their way of saying that even though they had set up the temple in Jerusalem, really, even before that temple had been built, there was already this shrine in Bethel. And so later on, when we get to that point in the Old Testament, we'll see that come up again. If you have any other insights about this reading, I'd love to hear what you have to say, because I've just always been very puzzled by this reading.